Welcome to hearing stream 5 for the Napier City Proposed District Plan hearings. Today we have a focus on the various rural and settlement zones, a couple of development areas and a few other matters to be heard. This morning we will hear the opening statements from the council officers, reporting officers, and any response to questions from the panel that we circulated a few weeks ago. And then we will get on and hear some submitters after morning tea. So without any further comment, I will turn to the officers, and I think we do have the rural production and rural lifestyle zone first. Sagan?
Morena, thank you. Yes, so my name is Jerry Sargent. I'm a policy analyst at the Napier City Council's City Development team. My qualifications include a Bachelor of Business Studies and a Master of Public Policy. I have over 2 years' experience working as a resource management policy analyst, and I've been involved in the review of the PDP since October 2022. I was involved in finalising the rural production and rural lifestyle zones in the PDP, and I have prepared the Section 42 report for both. For an overview of the rural zones, a total of 32 original submissions raised 136 submission points on the rural production chapter, with 63 further submissions, and a total of 97 original submissions raised 119 submission points on the rural lifestyle chapter, and 22 further submissions. Due to the volume and nature of the submissions, assessments were grouped by provision type, introduction, definitions and issues, objectives, policies, rules, and then standards and other matters. Submissions raised a number of recurring themes across both chapters, including highly productive land, its alignment with the NPS HPL, especially clauses 3.9 and 3.10, reverse sensitivity, managing the interface conflicts between lifestyle and production land uses, existing activities and infrastructure, provision for established service stations, schools and utilities, rural support services, enabling emergency services and rural industries, activity statuses, clarifying rural pathways and reducing reliance on the non-complying status, residential uses, managing minor units, home occupations and worker housing, and servicing and noise, considering infrastructure capacity and rural noise expectations. No formal pre-hearing meetings with submitters were held in relation to submissions on either chapter. Pre-circulated submitter evidence and statements were received from a number of submitters. I have read this evidence and am prepared to respond to any questions or matters raised in relation to the information provided. I believe that in some cases there is scope to make changes to address concerns raised, but I wish to hear from the submitters before providing a response. From the evidence, the remaining matters of contention are as follows. The Ministry of Education seeks a discretionary status for educational facilities in the rural production zone, citing that their importance to rural communities. I recommend retaining the non-complying status to avoid undermining the zone's primary purpose of protecting productive land. This remains a point of contention, particularly whether education facilities are inherently incompatible with the purpose of the rural production zone, whether a discretionary status offers sufficient protection against inappropriate development, and whether the social and functional role of schools in rural areas warrants a more enabling policy approach. Kiwi Rail no longer seeks a separate rail setback rule, but continues to request that structures be included in the 6-metre yard setback to address safety risks. I acknowledge the safety intent, but remain concerned that this could disproportionately affect minor structures and constrained sites. I do, however, see the merit in introducing a specific setback for rural produce retail stalls, which are not currently subject to general yard standards. These matters remain partly in contention, particularly whether applying setbacks to structures is proportionate and an effects-based response. The fuel companies seek a more enabling provisions for existing service stations in the rural production zone, including discretionary activity or refinements to allow for minor physical expansion. I support a more constrained approach through APRA's R20, limiting changes to maintenance only to avoid urban creep and protect the zone's productive function. The key point of contention is whether enabling small-scale upgrades undermines the purpose of the zone and provides, or if it provides necessary flexibility for established activities. Angela McFlynn and Dooney Brothers seek broader removal of references to versatile land, setbacks and cross-zone amenity considerations, which I have only partially supported to maintain alignment with the regional policy statement and manage rural interface effects. They also seek a more enabling provisions for residential activities, visitor accommodation and home businesses, including on HPL, which I do not support due to the NPS HPL and the zone purpose. Setback provisions, it's RLZ S3 and RPROS S3. And assessment criteria remain in contention due to the differing views on proportionality and drafting clarity. And finally, Hort NZ maintains that a residential activity may be appropriate on highly productive land in some cases. I consider that this remains a matter of contention as residential dwellings are not identified as supporting activities under the NPS HPL and should remain controlled in the RPROS. While I acknowledge that the complexity of this issue, I consider it best practice for, the assessment criteria relating to cross-zone effects also remains a matter of contentions. I acknowledge the complexity of this issue, but I consider it best practice for councils to assess interface effects between zones and manage potential land use conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the panel?
Yeah, just in terms of the Kiwi Rail issue, just reading their pre-circulated evidence, I'm just wondering how you've formed your view that in the rural zone a 6 metre yard setback would constrain activities. The rural zone, we're not talking about an urban environment, we're talking about an open landscape generally, orchards and paddocks. How would a 6 metre strip unduly constrain or disproportionately affect those activities?
Certainly. My assessment of it unduly restraining was specifically to do with the addition of the word structures. So that might include something that is minor and already quite close to an existing boundary, and then they would be required to have an additional 6 metre setback. And that was thinking about things that might exist in a rural environment already. But I do take your point that it is already a vast environment itself.
It wouldn't affect any existing structures, would it? They'd have existing use rights.
Oh, correct. Yes, that's
so
right.
So it would only be new structures. Okay. Well, let's just say I'm not convinced that it's unduly disproportionate. Sure. Okay, thanks. That was
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Just to clarify, the Ministry of Education point, they do have designation powers, don't they? And I presume there's a number of designated schools throughout the city.
That's right. They have addressed that in their statement as well, and that was my position to continue to use the designation powers because they do have that in Napier, and they did say that they would like to provide for both pathways still.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had related to this supporting activities question. So I mean, I've been looking at what the NPS says about it, and and you're quite right. The definition of supporting activity does not refer to residential. Is there any further guidance being provided by MFE on that point? Because it seems to me that one interpretation could be that they just presume that residential is not a supporting activity in terms of an economic, part of the economic functioning of a farm or an orchard or what have you, but it's just an ancillary part of the use of the land. Has there been any guidance from MFE on that matter?
Yeah, the statement that I made was with the guidance that I had available. Fleur, do you have any other awareness of MFE guidance?
I believe that there was some evidence put forward by the submitters to say that there is some guidance material that does indicate that residential activities could be included as supporting activities, despite the fact that it's not included in the definition. So that's something that we would need to look into a little bit further.
Okay, because I would thought that from a general sort of interpretation point, a residential component of a productive unit would be sort of a given in most cases. Although I can understand the opposite, that you can have a lot of very small lots and properties in highly productive land that you may not have a large ability to or capacity to put residential units in without taking away a lot of that productive capability. So Okay, so, in terms of that point you just made, Ms. Lincoln, are you waiting to hear from Hort New Zealand further before responding?
Correct, yes. So the evidence that they put forward demonstrated some very good reasons as to why a residential activity on the site would be beneficial. I guess our concern was that in enabling residential activities on highly productive land within a rural environment, that there could be some effect on the ability to then use that land in the most efficient way because of the types of activities that happen on that site. So, yeah, really keen to hear what they will bring forward in the evidence today.
Just finally, do you have any information on the scale of the issue in terms of how many properties within the productive zone, rural productive zone, wouldn't have residential uses on them?
No, that's not data that I've collected in this assessment, but can do in the report if that's helpful.
If it's available. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. So, who's next to be talking to us?
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
Awesome. Okay, I think for the sake of time,
Yes.
if you just want to maybe introduce yourself and then just expand on the outstanding matters and things
Sure.
after perhaps paragraph 8 onwards.
Yep.
After them.
No problem.
Excuse me.
Right.
So would you like me to start with the settlement zone?
Yep. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lily Lawson. I am employed as an associate planner at Barker & Associate and as a consultant planner to Napier City Council and the reporting officer for the settlement chapter of the PDP. My qualifications include a Bachelor of Urban Planning with honours. I have over 8 years' experience working as a resource management planner, including various resource management positions in local government, levy organisations and private consultancy. I was not involved in the drafting of the settlement zone chapter, but prepared the Section 42A report for the matters relating to all settlement zone provisions. I am aware that evidence has been received by the following parties in relation to this topic: McFlynn Surveying and Planning, Jack Brownlee, NZTA and Ministry of Education. The matters pursued through evidence are by Angela McFlynn, who maintains that the 30-metre setback required by Standard 3 and 4 should be deleted. NZTA, who accept the assessment in the Section 42A report, including in relation to reverse sensitivity effects. Jack Brownlee on matters of consistency with the subdivision chapter, and Ministry of Education continue to seek a restricted discretionary activity for educational facilities. I'm able to respond to any queries from the panel.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just one, previous hearings, we've discussed the officers are working with Fire and Emergency New Zealand on some standard wording. Where's that at?
Do you want me to take that? Sure. So we reached out to FENS after hearing stream 4
Yeah.
to try and come to an agreement on what the wording would be. They weren't able to get back to us in sufficient time to be able to do that, so we're continuing to work on that together.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Lawson? I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Ms. Lawson.
Thank you. I'll now go to the Jervois Town Precinct. And no evidence has been received in relation to this topic. However, I did have a pre-hearing meeting with Vanessa Moon in relation to this topic. The purpose of this meeting was for points of clarification and to answer questions in relation to the submitter's points. And I understand she isn't presenting this afternoon. Able to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes, just the bottom of page 3. So it's the answers to the panel's questions.
Yes.
Right down the bottom, you say you agree it would be helpful to make amendments to make it clear to plan users, etc. What amendments did you have in mind?
I think based on some submitters, there was confusion about a precinct approach and whether this changed substantively the operative district plan provisions to the PDP. So I was thinking some very minor amendments if it was helpful to submitters and if the panel considered it was necessary, outlining the purpose of a precinct approach.
So just what would be the general thrust of the wording, just generally? What?
I haven't turned my mind to that.
But what would the intent be?
In my mind, I thought clarifying that the precinct was required by national plan. The precinct is a tool for councils under the national planning standards, and that this enables bespoke provisions for a certain area.
So it'd be explaining the nature of the precinct.
Yes.
Well, not the nature of the precinct, but just the nature of the precinct as a planning tool.
Yes.
Morning, Lily. So I've just got a question around infrastructure. So several of the submitters contested that idea that Jervois Town infrastructure can't support further intensification or subdivision, particularly since many of the large lots are already containing self-contained services. And so I was just wondering if you could clarify where the evidence or the assumption that you've used to form the view that additional intensification is inappropriate or not possible.
Inappropriate?
It's probably would pose a risk, I think was the wording that was used.
Yes, that's based on the operative provisions for one in the Section 32 assessment that was undertaken to largely carry those over to the precinct approach. There's been no analysis to suggest otherwise, and the plan, both the operative and the proposed, includes the situation in which further development would be considered, and that requires 75% of the property owners to agree, and that would be passed by council to enable further subdivision. So it sets a very clear direction in which case further intensification would be considered appropriate, and there's no analysis to or assessment to suggest that that approach isn't the best approach.
But we rely heavily on the infrastructure inability in the area to maintain additional or increase additional infrastructure to support those developments in the report. That's correct?
Sorry, repeat that again.
So we rely heavily on the view that it is not possible to put in additional infrastructure to support that growth.
That the infrastructure isn't available at this stage, and that should the it sets the clear parameters in which scenarios that infrastructure could occur, and only then would that mean that Jervois Town is appropriate for further intensification.
Yeah, and can you reconcile that for me for your answer, I think, further on in regards to the request for detailed structure planning, and the response was that was not appropriate at the moment, or not recommended to complete?
The submitter requested further structure planning.
Correct.
Yes, I mean, that structure planning work hasn't been undertaken, so the reliance is on the provisions to set the situation in which that structure planning would occur.
I think I'm just trying to reconcile in my mind. We're saying inappropriate to put any more intensification in the area due to constraints with infrastructure, and at the same time saying we're not recommending detailed structure planning in future. And so is the overarching reasoning for that, I guess, the rural character or the lifestyle settlement character that underpins both of those recommendations?
That's what I was thinking.
Yes, I mean, the structure planning hasn't been undertaken. The amendments that I've recommended to Appendix A adopt the approach that was included in the operative district plan, which outlines when and how that structure planning would occur, and that requires that 75% of the property owners agree to that occurring.
Thank you very much.
I've just got a follow-up question. So I'm a little bit confused by all of this, because if you look at the Notified District Plan, Appendix 8C, it's Jervistown Structure Plan of Services required to facilitate main residential zoning.
Yes.
So there is a structure plan.
Yes, but that the amendments that I've recommended for the introduction, they set out when that occurs, and that requires 75% of the landowners to agree to it, and that it would be funded by them.
Okay. So just in terms of those appendices 8C, etc.
Yes.
And when I'm looking at them on the version of the E-plan that you sent a link to ages ago for the panel to use, the notified provisions, there's no key. So when I'm looking at Appendix 8C, there's blue dotted lines, black dotted lines, green lines, red lines, and I've got no idea what those lines are. So can the staff print off a key, colour-coded, a colour print version of the key that applies to those appendices? So that'd be 8A through 8A, 8B, 8C, just so I can tell what's going on. That'd be great, thanks.
And just follow up on those questions too. I mean, just looking at the online maps for it, it seems that the area is fairly residentially developed already. I mean, there's two main streets there with that looks like a general residentially zoned kind of neighbourhood. It's just sort of on the perimeters of this block where there's obviously some scope for further development if necessary. Is that the long-term strategy? Is there a long-term strategy for the settlement? No? It doesn't have a role in, for instance, the future development strategy?
No.
No, okay. So is it like, I'm just trying to, get my head around the structure plan, what the structure plan is trying to achieve really in the ultimate end. Is it just completion of if infrastructure were provided, is it completion of the development of that area into a general residential kind of zone?
I think, yes. I mean, the structure plan refers to main residential zoning.
Ultimately in the future.
And, I mean, there's probably a lot of historical background to the Jervistown area that I'm personally not able to speak to, but, there's a reason why this appendix has the introduction and the requirement for the 75% buy-in, and I think it's clear from the submissions that there's also some members of the community who want to see it further developed and some members who don't. So I think the provisions that we have are a result of that background and perhaps tension within the area as to what the community wants for that area.
Right. But the introduction does note that there's, the Jervistown zone is suitable for residential development. So it's really primarily about the ability to service that development that question lies.
Yes, and the community's desires for it as well.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I wrote the section 32. Could I also add
Yes,
a little
certainly.
bit of background?
Yep, that helps.
So yeah, I think we've covered it, but just to kind of clarify, the reason that it was set up back then is because there was a lot of resistance to develop it from the community itself. It's a mix of what's already been said right now. They wanted to maintain the rural character. Jervistown doesn't have any clear footpaths. It's like roads straight into the open stormwater into medium-sized residential area, like lots. And so there was a desire to keep that the way that it is. Recently, because of the environmental events that have been happening, there's been a change in the community outcome, and that was happening right around the time that we notified the PDP as well, with the flooding and then later the cyclone as well, where the community started realising there would be a need for infrastructure improvements, but the tool that was used in the operative and then brought over was because of the significant cost to increase. There did need to be that 75, and it is about funding, that 75% agreement from the community. Yes, we are comfortable with increasing the infrastructure, and if we get that 75%, that's when the structure plan would be implemented. So it has been kind of confusing because the interest of the community has changed, and that's why I think we're starting to see more in the submitters versus what was notified and done through the Section 32, where they actually do want more development and more planning and more thinking done around the infrastructure in that area. That provides a little bit of background.
No, it's helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
And just one more thing. So where did the 75% come from? Is that a statutory requirement? Is that in the local government? Or is it something that Napier City made up some time ago?
It's a historical number.
And what's the rationale for keeping that?
Apologies, it was just intended to be rolled over. There was no further assessment done about the figure itself.
Because that's quite a crucial threshold, isn't
It
it?
is a significant number.
So elsewhere in the city, if the city, Napier City's considering infrastructural improvements, does it require some kind of landowner referendum like this as well, or is this unique?
I'm not aware of
This is unique, yeah.
So why do we keep it?
I guess it was driven in the operative plan when there was a plan change done to introduce this zone. It was a community-led plan change,
Right.
and it was their desire to have a majority, and they chose that percentage for that, and essentially this was the intention was to roll forward their desires into the proposed district plan.
Yeah. And so when it was decided to roll the 75% into the proposed plan, was that based on a further community referendum, or was it just assuming no change?
No community referendum, but just the usual consultation that we did through the draft and proposed for the community.
And there was only one submission received on the draft PDP relating to Jervistown. So no community referendum.
Yeah, okay.
So sorry to carry this bomb, but so that the first line in the introduction contains the procedure required to move the zone to a main residential zone. So is that well understood in this area, that that's the long-term intention is to move into a fully residentially developed area?
I think it's very clear from the submissions that there's still people who don't want to see that, and they would obviously fall within those community members that would vote against funding the infrastructure.
Right. Okay, and the other question is a follow-up to Commissioner Van Voorthousen's one about that structure plan, because for me, just looking again at the planning maps for this area, if it is to be more the whole area more residentially developed, the structure plan may need to change to accommodate further growth in parts of it where is relatively undeveloped at the moment. But I suppose it's an ongoing kind of long-term thing. Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
It's a fascinating little anomaly in the overall structure of the plan.
Yes.
Sure is. Okay, thank you, Ms Lawson, for that.
Turning now to Whararangi Road development area. Evidence has been received by Mana Ahuriri Trust, who have submitted planning, economic, traffic and urban design evidence, and Sarah Chambers, who pursues her submission points in relation to private property rights, as well as her further submission points. The matters pursued by Mana Ahuriri are amendments to Standard 1, seeking a controlled activity status rather than discretionary activity, and subdivision where standards are not met should be classified as a restricted discretionary rather than discretionary. And they pursue their submission in relation to a new standard to provide for a single supermarket tenancy of up to 2,500 metres squared as a permitted activity. I'm able to respond to any questions the panel has.
Any questions?
Just a very easy question for you. So page 3, para 20, second bullet. I assume that's a typo. That should be 2,500, not 25,000 metres squared. You got an extra zero in there.
Oh, I do too. Yes.
Okay.
That would be a very large supermarket. No, just the 2,500.
Yeah. That was all. Thanks.
Any further questions? No, I don't have any questions. Thank you. What topic do you want to
Yes, sorry, I jumped. I didn't realise I went out of order then.
That's cool.
I'll go to the mission precincts and development area now. So the majority of submissions received in relation to this topic were by Emerald Hills Joint Venture and Marist Holdings, and I have received evidence from both of those parties in relation to this topic. At my paragraph 23, I set out the issues pursued through evidence. The development area by Emerald Hills. They seek the deletion of the policy for the walkway and cycleway network. Amendments to the assessment criteria to remove the requirement for the extent to which objectives and policies for the mission development area will be achieved. They've provided alternative relief for matters G to H in the assessment criteria. They seek amendments to I to give direction that stormwater infrastructure is to be vested to council, and this is consistent with the evidence that they put forward in hearing stream 4. Amendments to N to Q to confirm these do not apply to the mission residential precinct, and amendments to O3 regarding the woodland hillside with a relief consistent with the response to questions raised by the panel in hearing stream 4. Turning to the mission landscape and visitor precinct, Marist Holdings support the recommended changes to Standard 5, conditions relating to the event duration, the use of amplified sound equipment, the undertaking of sound checks, and exemption to the noise limits. And I just note that the panel has requested revised wordings. And they continue to seek changes to provide for smaller events with details of how this may be achieved yet to be finalised. Turning to the productive rural landscape, Marist Holdings preference is to retain the permitted activity status for rural R1. In the rural residential precinct, Emerald Hills, pursue amendments to Standard 1 to align with relief sought for standard sub S3, noting that amendments would be required to the density standard if the minimum lot size was to be reduced to below 2,500 metres squared as sought in sub S3. I'm able to respond to any questions.
Okay, just before I turn to the panel, so we did have quite a bit of evidence from you know, where are you at in terms of the changes they've sought? Are you sort of generally in agreement with the changes they've sought?
Are you talking about Emerald Hills or
I'm talking about, no,
Marist?
yeah, Marist.
Yes, I mean, I think they were largely supportive of the recommendations in my section 42. I think probably the outstanding ones relate to Emerald Hills,
Yeah.
mainly.
Okay, and okay, now I'll hold back my question on that one. Thank you. Any questions?
No.
Just the footnotes at the bottom of page 3,
Yes.
update, please.
No update at this stage, I'm sorry.
So have there been discussions with the submitter, or is that yet?
No, that's yet to occur.
No discussions with submitters?
No.
And I had the same question in response to panel questions, hearing panel questions, where there was a note to say, will be discussed further with the submitter. This is on the Mission Landscape Visitor Precinct.
Yes, no, that conversation hasn't occurred yet, I'm sorry. But we'll do that ahead of the officer's reply, obviously.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear a word of that.
Oh, sorry, that I will do that and put forward an aligned position or state where we differ in the officer's reply.
Yeah, given that you've indicated a desire to discuss with the submitters, would it be appropriate for a joint witness statement to come forward?
Yep, potentially, yes, if the panel
More
wishes
than
that.
potentially, I'd say.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to me there's quite a lot of potential agreement on all these points.
Yes,
And it'd be useful for the panel to see where all those lie, and in
Yes.
particular where any outstanding
yes, definitely.
remain. Thank you.
maybe a joint witness statement in a week's time or so, like well in advance of reply report deadlines. I'm not sure what the reply report target is for this hearing stream, but imagine if you can have a discussion with only 2 planners involved, aren't there? Cam Drury and
Yes,
Phil
yes.
Mackay. You should be able to sort things out.
Yes, definitely, yeah. And obviously, we have the rezoning hearing tomorrow as well, where Marist is, yeah.
We'll have a JWS.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Moving to the Te Awa development area. And the update on this is that Durham Property Investments Limited submitted a memo last night, which I understand has been circulated to you. And the memo confirms that they are accepting of the amendments sought by Napier City Council Infrastructure Team, subject to minor revision to the references to the various structure plan appendices within the wider development area provisions. And the changes sought by Napier City Council seeking that the operative district plan appendixes replace those included in the PDP, but that the ODP wastewater appendix is updated to reflect the consented and constructed location of pump stations.
Okay. Any questions?
No, it's pretty clear.
No, I have no questions, thank you. Designations?
Yes. So turning to the NZTA designation, I'm not aware of any evidence that has been submitted in relation to this topic.
Yep. Yeah.
Does the panel have any questions?
No, that seems a fairly simple one.
Yes.
I do just have one question. I read in one of the submissions there was a request for what they were calling a sunset clause over designations, and I wonder, I was trying to find in your reply if that had been considered.
Sorry, in my opening statement, when I wrote my opening statement, no evidence had been received in relation to this topic.
So when the landowners affected wanted more detailed conditions or sunset clauses on designations rather than indefinite, and I just hadn't seen that before and was looking for a response to that suggestion.
I'll have to come back to you on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can't remember. Designations have lapse dates. Is there a provision in the Act to provide a lapse date for a designation?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
5 years unless specified otherwise. I presume that's what they were referring
assume
to as
that's
a
what they-
lapsing kind
Yeah,
of provision.
they referred to it in their submission as a sunset clause, but that sounds correct, and I think it was in relation to future road corridors.
Okay. Yeah, I can provide a response to you on that. Turning to the Hawke's Bay Airport Limited designation. Going to paragraph 11, the matters that have been pursued through evidence. Ms. Robotham accepts the recommended changes to HBAL 1 airport height control purposes. Turning to HBAL 2 airport purposes, the noise conditions. Ms. Robotham pursues amendments to align with the recommendations of Ms. O'Sullivan at hearing stream 4, in particular deleting references to the A and B and the 65 dB noise contour and replacing them with references to the aircraft noise overlay and other consequential amendments as necessary, including the deletion of condition 29. The removal of limits on the frequency of unplanned engine testing, and that it is retained in the list of exclusions. Opposes the recommendations with regard to condition 30 and 31 relating to management and monitoring of noise from aircraft operations. Opposes the recommended amendments to conditions 30 to 32 regarding additional monitoring. Opposes the changes relating to height in relation to boundaries, storage, landscaping, fences and walls on the basis that the designation is not required to be consistent with underlying zoning and that they are not relevant to the airport purposes. Deletion of condition 21 relating to stormwater servicing, given there is no reticulated stormwater servicing available at the airport and Ms. Robotham and I had a brief phone call last week, and just offering the ability to meet on matters after the hearing to discuss any outstanding issues.
So can you just help us by telling us what those outstanding issues are at the moment? Are you able to do that?
Yes, so there's outstanding issues in relation to the noise condition and the reference to the outer, the A and B and the 65 dB noise boundary, and that was an issue brought up in the noise chapter as well. Unplanned engine testing.
What's the outstanding issue in regard to that?
Ms. Robotham didn't support the amendments that I recommended in relation to the frequency of that testing, and that was in the absence of any understanding from my end of how often unplanned engine testing occurs.
So you're after a bit more information from the airport on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To ascertain the potential effects of that. And then, Ms. Robotham opposes the recommendations in my report that I've made in relation to some standards for consistency with the underlying zoning, on the basis that they're not relevant to airport purposes and that a designation isn't required to be consistent with underlying zoning, and condition of 21, deletion of condition 21 relating to stormwater, and conditions 30 to 32 regarding additional monitoring that was recommended.
Sorry, I'm just reviewing Ms. Rowbotham's evidence to...
Which is fairly comprehensive. So Ms. Rowbotham's, her Appendix A to her evidence outlined the changes she's still seeking with clear explanation for those changes in the body of her evidence. But there's been no meeting with her yet?
No, not at this stage. We've had a brief phone call and expressing the willingness by both parties to meet.
Mr. Chair, I think this is another example where a joint witness statement would be highly desirable, identifying areas of agreement and disagreement with reasons, and probably take Ms. Rowbotham's amendments as a starting point, and for the joint witness statement to indicate any disagreement with reasons from Napier City's perspective.
Sure.
And again, if that could happen reasonably promptly, it'd be good.
Just initially, though, looking at her track changes, Ms. Lawson, is it clear where you can agree and not disagree at the moment? Are there sort of, should we say, the majority of the changes you can support? Can you say that?
I think it will be helpful to hear the discussion on those matters today.
Okay.
And also, there's some differences in opinion in relation to the council's position taken in the noise chapter.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not in a position, I would support consistency with the noise chapter. So the outcome of that is will have an impact on my position.
Well, we'll hear from her today as well, so
Yes.
ask her those questions. Thank you. Any further questions on airport?
Nope, look forward to the joint witness statement.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lawson.
But also, the officers might usefully take guidance from our questions on the noise chapter, where we asked for provisions. What would provisions look like if we were to only have one overlay, which gives some indication of at least the options the panel's exploring quite diligently at the moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I've included my response in the questions that the panel raised for the
Yeah.
Hawke's Bay Airport as well.
Right. Cool.
Okay, and I think our final one was financial contributions. Lucky last.
That's me, yes. Good morning. My name's Michelle Grigg, and my statement relates to the financial contributions chapter. I'm employed as a senior policy analyst in Napier City Council's City Development Team. My qualifications include a Master of Social Science in Geography and Demography. I have 20 years' experience working as a policy advisor in central and local government, and I've been involved in the proposed district plan since July 2024. Whilst I prepared the Section 42A report for the matters relating to the financial contributions chapter, I was not involved in preparing the proposed plan. I have read the submitter evidence and statements in relation to the financial contributions chapter, and am ready to respond to any queries about these from the panel. So firstly, an overview of the topic. The charging of financial contributions is an important mechanism in carrying out council's functions under Section 31 of the Resource Management Act 1991. The contributions cover all types of development, residential and non-residential, across the city. The actual quantum of the financial contributions is specified in the chapter and indexed annually through council's fees and charges. Council adopted a new financial contributions policy as part of its 3-year plan 2024 to 2027. The policy states that for the next 3 years, Council will continue to utilise financial contributions under the Resource Management Act as per the provisions of the district plan. So of note here, the proposed district plan was notified in September 2023, 8 months prior to the update to the financial contributions policy, which was adopted on 27 June 2024. In terms of the matters raised in submissions, 7 submissions were received on the proposed chapter, raising 22 submission points. This includes submission points made on the definitions chapter and appendices 15 and 16. 5 further submissions raising 12 further submission points were also received. The issues raised in the submissions as presented in my Section 42A report largely reflect the structure of the policy framework within the chapter, and as such they cover issues, objectives and policies, standards, definitions and the financial contributions tables in Appendix 15. Just to summarise now some of the key matters raised in the submissions, I'm recommending several small amendments to the introduction, issues, objectives and policies within the chapter for the purpose of providing clarity. Similarly, I'm recommending amendments to provide clarity to Standard 1 subdivision and Standard 2 residential multi-unit development. I'm recommending widespread changes to the financial contributions tables in Appendix 15 in response to a submission from Napier City Council's policy team, submitter 196, requesting inclusion of the most up-to-date indexed figures in order to align with the revised 2024 financial contributions policy. And the purpose of this is to assist with ensuring accuracy and ease of interpretation. I'm recommending a number of other amendments in Appendix 15 to the formatting, naming and notation within that appendix to ensure clarity and alignment with the policy, and also alignment with Appendix 16. I'm also recommending that the tables 3 and 4 in Appendix 15, which provide a further breakdown of allocations for non-local off-site financial contributions, be deleted. I've also noted in my report the Coalition Government's intent to consult on a local government infrastructure funding bill later in 2025, which is anticipated to include consideration of a development levy system for use by local authorities. In terms of pre-hearing meetings, I held a meeting with Mr Simon Bradshaw, Napier City Council's Infrastructure Developments Manager. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss Mr Bradshaw's submissions on the financial contributions chapter, seeking to ensure contributions fairly cover development costs for any required council-owned or managed infrastructure. At that meeting, Mr Bradshaw confirmed Council has no intent at this time to introduce a development contributions policy as an alternate to the current financial contributions policy. So a financial contributions chapter within the plan remains necessary. It is anticipated that as per usual process, the current financial contributions policy will be updated as part of Council's long-term plan 2027 to 2037 and informed by a planned review of the Essential Services Development Plan, which was last developed in the year 2000. I also held a pre-hearing meeting with Powerco Limited's planning representative, Mr Gary Schofield, submitter 172. The purpose of that meeting was to discuss Powerco's submission seeking an amendment to the plan's definition of development to exclude infrastructure in order to ensure Powerco would not be charged financial contributions for their infrastructure. And my recommendation for addressing this concern is presented in my Section 42A report. No other correspondence or pre-hearing meetings with submitters were held in relation to this chapter. Pre-circulated evidence relating to the financial contributions chapter was received from one party, Ms Angela McFlynn of McFlynn Surveying and Planning. Ms McFlynn's evidence relates to her submission about the collection of financial contributions for stormwater infrastructure and on-site stormwater management requirements. I have read this evidence and look forward to hearing from the submitter today. The panel raised some questions in relation to my Section 42A report, including a request for legal advice. I've responded to these in a separate document, which was provided to the panel in advance of the hearing. So based on the matters raised in submissions and subsequent pre-circulated submitter evidence, the primary matter of contention is Ms McFlynn's request to have flexibility in the assessment of stormwater-related financial contributions to ensure that contributions paid relate to the impact of the development, particularly where stormwater neutrality will be required as per the proposed provisions in the plan's stormwater chapter. The financial contributions chapter remains relevant as Council has no immediate plans to progress with developing a development contributions policy. As an additional procedural matter, I note that there may be consequential amendments required in the Appendix 15 tables depending on outcomes arising from the upcoming rezoning hearings for the plan. My colleague, Mr Simon Bradshaw, is attending this morning should the panel have any questions relating to calculations and infrastructure requirements. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Just a quick question from me before we open it up. So you're not recommending any changes subsequent to seeing the evidence and in response to questions from the panel to the provisions?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, just one question then a comment. Paragraph 24, what sort of consequential amendments are you talking about there?
Sorry, are you talking about panel 24? Oh, sorry.
Paragraph 24 in your opening statement.
In my opening statement, not in my report. In terms of any new development area.
Can you give me some examples? Like what would a consequential amendment be that you had in mind? What would be a specific example? Just to help me understand.
Yeah, I don't have one off the top of my head. Blair, did you?
You don't know what the amendments would be?
Pardon?
So you have no idea what the consequential amendments might be?
This is something we talked about as a team, and it's, in my mind, it would be changes to areas or the development areas that are identified in the appendix, Appendix 15 and 16, yeah.
Right. So should rezoning submissions be accepted by the panel, that would have a flow-on effect to development areas, etc.
Correct.
And now just comments, so not a question. First of all, thank you very much for the Rice Spear legal opinion, which addressed the concerns I certainly had about scope, so thank you for providing that. I think it's good to have that on the record. And secondly, I think the amendments that you're suggesting to Appendix 15, I found interesting. I mean, Councillor Brosnan and I had to get our heads around this chapter of the plan very recently in terms of the Franklin Road subdivision, and I can tell you it wasn't easy. The existing provisions are a bit of a shambles, so it's good to see that it's been clarified. I think in particular the recommendation to delete tables 3 and 4 is quite helpful because they were confusing in terms of how they related to the earlier tables. And I'm very heartened to see that there's an intent to shortly update the 25-year-old essential services plan, which again was quite problematic when we came to interpret these provisions and apply them as we had to under the law. So I guess that's not a question, but just a comment on what you've recommended to us.
Right, thank you.
Questions? I have no further questions, so thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, just turning to the schedule.
Yeah, 50.
Nicola, could you just maybe see this? Okay, so our next, our first submitter for this hearing will be Hort New Zealand, and that's scheduled for 10:50, so perhaps I'll adjourn the hearing now and wait for 10:50. Re-adjourn then. Thank you very much. And now have a submitter before us online. Good morning, Jonathan. Can you hear us all right?
Good morning. Yes, I can, yeah.
Thank you. We can see you as well. So we have read your pre-circulated statement. Thank you very much. But it's over to you to talk to the main points you'd like to make.
Great. No problem. And so thank you again for the opportunity to talk about the status of relocated buildings and the proposed Napier district plan. So in this hearing, as I read in our written notes for this, so the three main zones that the association's got an interest in clarifying what the activity rules are for relocated buildings. And just to confirm, we are seeking the same or similar rules for relocation across these zones.
Right.
And at this stage, don't see any zone-specific reasons why there needs to be variation for this amongst these three. And really, okay, so to cut to the chase, so as stated in our written information to this hearing, we would support the analysis in the Section 42A settlement zone report. So in our view, this accurately summarised the association's position, where we got to after hearing 4, and we endorse the writer's statement that really there should be a consistent and unified approach to relocation across the zones in this plan. And for clarity and confirmation of this, so in our written evidence, we've got a tracked version of the changes to the proposed conditions in Schedule 1. So hopefully that clarifies what we're after, and we're all on the same page there. As noted previously, we are prepared to accept the 9-month timeline for completion of all items identified in the reinstatement report. For reinstatement in the relocated building report. These performance conditions are requested to apply across the rural lifestyle, rural production and the settlement zones. As stated in our written submission to these plans, and given the numbering error in settlement plan section 42A report, we request that following finalisation of the proposed wording for these three zones, that the association has an opportunity to respond to this proposed wording. Given that I canvassed our rationale for these hearings in hearing 4, these requirements in hearing 4, really at this stage I have no extra points to make. And thank you for your time and listening to this follow-up submission. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your flexibility in agreeing to be heard earlier today.
No, all good. Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes. So just looking at your Schedule 1, and then relating that to the email that you sent to our hearing administrator, Nicola, following hearings, the hearing for hearing stream 4.
Yes.
And in terms of the building report, in your email, which was dated 12th of May, you suggested some wording that you said was used in other district council plans relating to a building condition report, which was just a one-line insertion. And I was just wondering, is that intended to replace, if I look at your Schedule 2, does that replace all of Clause 2? So would there just, instead of that big long Clause 2, would there just be that one sentence that was in your email?
Correct. Yes, you're exactly right. Yep.
Good.
You know, I was just thinking about that email this morning, and I was thinking, yes, that's right. I did send that email, and yes, I did communicate that to my legal submission people, but obviously we didn't quite catch up with that in our written submission here.
No, thank you for clarifying that. And now, Mr. Chair, I've been doing some work over the weekend on hearing stream 4.
Okay.
And I think I'd been looking at what the officers had recommended and what had come in from the submitter, and I'd landed on some wording that I thought represented the views. I'm happy to provide that wording to the submitter and also to the officers, and if then we could just have a joint statement coming back to say, yes, that's correct, I've interpreted the evidence correctly, or no, that's not quite correct, there's still a few little wording changes that could be made, and I think that might facilitate a more rapid resolution of this particular issue if you would find that to be appropriate.
So that's just to clarify, that would be just the general nature of the conditions for the district plan.
It would be a reworked version of Schedule 1 as attached to the evidence, just reflecting the evidence to date, or what I think the evidence to date is, and the officer and the submitter could very quickly say, yes, that's correct, we're happy with that or not.
And that would be the one that would apply across the
All of the
zones.
zones, yeah, so we get consistency of wording.
Sounds sensible?
All right, so I'll undertake to do that within the next day or so, and look forward to either having that wording confirmed or some further improvements to it. Great.
Listen, I think it's a great process. Yep, very happy to engage with that. No problem at all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions. Any questions?
No, very clear, thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that. That was helpful, and we look forward to that joint witness statement on that particular topic.
Lovely.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Garner-Thompson.
Great.
And with that, we will adjourn properly for morning tea and resume at 10:50. Thank you very much. We're still waiting for our third panellist. Well, welcome everybody. Hearing stream number 5 is re-adjourned after morning tea. Our next submitter will be Hawked New Zealand, and we have Sarah Cameron online and Dr. Jury, who's table. Good morning. And we are trying to deal with the heat issue in this room, so bear with us, please. Thank you. We've read your pre-circulated evidence. Otherwise, the floor is yours to talk to the key points you'd like to make, particularly in response to anything that's arisen since then from the reporting officers as well. So thank you.
Cool. I'll let Sarah start first, and then I'll tidy up or pick up on anything else that she mentions.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Cameron. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst for Horticulture New Zealand. I've just recently taken over the district plan work for the Hawke's Bay region. With me, as you all know, is Dr. Charlotte Jury, who is our expert planner attached to the Hawke's Bay region. My evidence is industry evidence and related to 3 key areas, which is seasonal worker accommodation, residential activities and setbacks. And I take your note that you've read all the documents, which is great. So I guess if you have any questions for me before I hand over to Charlotte.
I don't know if you heard, but we were asking questions in regard to this whole issue about whether a residential activity is a supporting activity or not under the MPS for highly productive land, or whether it's a sort of built-in assumption that that would be part of their productive use of land. Do you have any views? I think the officers were going to look to see if there's further guidance from MFE on that point. Do you have any advice or information?
So I think this is covered under Charlotte's evidence, but in the implementation guide, I think it sets out around residential activity being a supporting activity, which can be located on highly productive land. Charlotte, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes. Yep, exactly as Sarah was saying, in the implementation guide for the MPS, it provides some examples, and specifically clause 3.9.2 states that activities such as residential accommodation for the landowner and or farm staff and seasonal worker accommodation, as well as some others, would all be anticipated under this clause where these support land-based primary production.
Okay. Thank you. And are you aware of any plan around the country that sort of would manage residential activities as a separate component to rural production activities?
I'm not, and Sarah's probably...
No.
No, okay.
No, I'm not, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. Any questions from the panel? Ms. Cameron?
Nope, that's fine, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Dr. Jury?
Cool. Yeah, I guess the key, we are very aware in horticulture that it is a very diverse range of industries, and as a result we have quite specific requirements. And so I think the key points, as Sarah has said, you guys have read our evidence, but it is that the key points that we've highlighted is that restriction on the ability to have a residential property on highly productive land, particularly in the Napier City District, where almost all of the horticultural blocks are on highly productive land, classes 1, 2 or 3, it just simply doesn't work in this context. And it was, as Sarah stated in her evidence, and I was personally involved in the recovery from Cyclone Gabriel, caused huge stress for people when they did not and cannot still in some places, in Pakawhai particularly, reside on their properties, because that security aspect is really, really important, as well as that very practical aspect in horticulture where there is, frost protection, for example, is very often needs to be done at 3 o'clock in the morning. It can't be done at 3 p.m. before you leave your property. So that ability to respond at any time of the day or night is critically important, and as I mentioned, a bit peculiar to horticulture. And then the requirements around the side and the rear yards, I guess, is, obviously all of these things are really just about enabling the highly productive land resource to be used as productively as possible. And it is those supporting activities, but it's also having setbacks that are appropriate and not, providing separation where separation is needed, but also, I guess, the flip side of that, not requiring separation, the crop protection structures being able to go up close to the boundary, and what we're proposing is 3 metres, not unnecessarily excluding that land, that highly productive land, from being utilised for that purpose. So, I guess a bit of a mixture, but what we've put forward is certainly what we see as being the planning framework that would enable the land reuse resource to be used as efficiently as possible.
Okay, thank you. Have you seen in terms of the separation distance, you referred to the 30-metre setback things. Have you seen the evidence of Ms McFlynn, who's in the back row at the moment, in terms of the setback issues and things? Have you got any sort of comments or opinion on
This is Sarah's area of expertise particularly, so I'll let you talk to it first, Sarah, in terms of your experience across the country.
Yeah, sure. So a project that I've been leading within Horticulture New Zealand is to streamline district plan rules for fruit production in New Zealand for horticulture. And as part of that, we've undertaken consultation with growers. And one of the things we've been talking about is setbacks from boundaries, particularly where there's sensitive activities along that boundary. And we have come to the conclusion, well, the growers have that 30 metres seems to be the most appropriate to counter any reverse sensitivity effects. There are a number of plans around the country that have 13 metres, 25 metres, which support that view. So our view is that 30 metres is the most, I guess, realistic setback at a minimum that would protect particularly sensitive activities from those reverse sensitivity effects, and also enable the productive operation to continue to operate unimpeded.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the panel?
Yes. So, Dr. Jury, just a question for you. I'm looking at your conclusion, and in particular, our PROS Rule 5.1.
Yep.
And do you have available to you the Appendix A that was attached to the 42A report for this?
No, I don't, sorry. I've just got a copy.
Can one of the officers please provide that to Dr. Drew?
For R5.
Yeah, so our PROS Rule R5.
You're okay?
Yep.
Just take the computer.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So you're asking for, in the left-hand column, for the clause C, the third clause, to be deleted, is it? The one that says the activity is not located on highly productive land?
Yes, that's correct.
If we were to do that, then wouldn't we also need to delete the first rule in the right-hand side, which is where you default to if you don't meet that criteria and you become a restricted discretionary activity? So that whole RDIS rule would need to be deleted as well, leaving the remaining non-complying rule to be applying if the other two conditions aren't met. There'd be no need for the RDIS rule, would there?
No, that's correct.
And that'd be the same for Rule 6?
Yep, yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yep.
All right, thank you for that. That was all. So,
Was it all?
Yep.
Questions?
Hello, Dr. Jury. I just have a sort of planning opinion question, if you wouldn't mind. It's in regards to reverse sensitivity and the provisions in RPROZ 04 and P4. And I'm just have a reconciliation, I guess, question around what you're requesting around residential activities. And I'm just wondering, should they be amended to explicitly include residential dwellings that support horticulture activities as a supporting activity? And just looking for sort of some policy basis to do that on. So it's kind of a flow-on effect if we were to accept residential activities on highly productive land. There should be some exclusions in the reverse sensitivity rules or policy wording.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, because you're not required. Yeah, it probably comes down to the wording of it. Because you're obviously, we wouldn't be seeking a 30-metre setback from a dwelling on a horticultural land use. Yes. So I think at a principled level, completely agree. Like everything in planning, the devil would be in the actual drafting of it. Yeah.
And have you put any thought into what that could look like in terms of draft wording?
No, but I would be happy to work with Sarah to bring something back if that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing your opinion on that in reply if possible with staff. Thank you.
Okay, and one question from me anyway. The setback for artificial crop protection structures, you're suggesting that 3 metres is more appropriate than 6 metres from the boundary. I'm aware that some of these structures can be quite high, for apple orchards and things, they can be quite high. I was just looking at the height standard is 9 metres. So your 3 metres plus 9 metres is what you're supporting?
That's Sarah is far more across that than I, so.
Right. Is that correct, Ms. Cameron?
That's correct. So when you compare that with live shelter, I mean, live shelter can be in excess of 9 metres as well. And I guess important to point out, there's an Environment Court consent order that's come out of the Waikato district, which supports a 0 setback for artificial crop protection structures from boundaries, except where they border a residential property on the other boundary, and where that property is, and with 12 metres of that boundary, the setback for the artificial crop protection structure is 5 metres. So just where it borders that residential property, otherwise it's 0.
And what is the height limit applying to that structure?
I don't think there is a height limit.
Okay.
I can provide that to you if that would be helpful.
Could you? That would be very useful. Thank you. Any further questions? No. Good. No.
Just one question, and forgive me if this is covered somewhere in officer's reply. There was a point around structures, I think like greenhouses and seasonal worker accommodation, and a suggestion that they should be guided by supporting activity definitions rather than standard building coverage limits. Has that been agreed?
I don't remember, sorry, I'll need to review.
Okay. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind coming back to me on that, if the submitter's not familiar with where that's landed.
No, sorry, not off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions from the panel. Thank you very much for coming in this morning, Dr. Jury, and thank you, Ms. Cameron.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Yes.
Right. Bye.
Bye. Okay, Ms. McFlynn, would you like to come to the table, as they say? put your evidence in front of me. You're welcome again. A familiar face by now. We have read your pre-circulated evidence. Thank you very much for that. And I don't know if you've had a chance to review the opening statements of the officers, the relevant officer for the topics you're addressing.
Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do that.
No? Okay. All right. If you'd like to talk to your submission, that would be appreciated. Thank you. And this is on behalf of Dooney Brothers Partnership. Is that correct?
Yes. So there were two submissions. One was Dooney Brothers Partnership, and then one which was just from McFlynn Surveying and Planning. But because there was quite a lot of overlap between them,
All right.
I just came to speak to you once.
Okay. Thank you.
And in my evidence, I have separated out which submission that each point relates to, which hopefully will make it a little bit easier. So it's quite long, so I won't go through and read it all. But just from the submission that you've just heard, I think it's worth just touching on a couple of points in particular, and one being the 30-metre setback rules. So in particular in the rural lifestyle zone, the standard of a 30-metre buffer between the curtilage of any residential building and primary production activity just doesn't appear to be all that practical in reality as it's worded. So what I believe it says is that any residential activity must be at least 30 metres from any primary production activity, and that would often be occurring on the same piece of land. So residential activity is defined as the use of land and buildings by people for the primary purpose of living accommodation, which is not just the buildings, it's also the outdoor living, the household garden, any area in the curtilage of that dwelling that's used as the residence. Has to be 30 metres from any land that's used for grazing of animals, agriculture, horticulture. So that leaves like a 30-metre strip of no man's land on each property that's not allowed to be used as part of the residential activity, and you need a separation between the actual production activity, so it's kind of 30 metres of land that can't be used for anything. So that, I mean, obviously could be quite easily remedied just by referring to on an adjoining property, but still that's quite a large setback, especially in a lifestyle zone where the predominant use is expected to be residential. Any kind of primary production that is occurring there is more likely to be small scale on those smaller lifestyle sites. So it's not, to me, doesn't really seem to warrant a 30-metre separation for buildings. And on those smaller 5,000 square metre sites, that's probably in some cases going to leave you a very small area that is actually able to have a house on it if you're trying to keep 30 metres off all of your boundaries. And the same standards are in the rural production zone as well, and same issues. If you've got a rural production property with the 30 metres separation. And yeah, the highly productive land aspect, as Charlotte's already pointed out, the guidance document does clearly specify that a residential building on a farm is supporting activity. So yeah, just feel quite strongly that every property should be able to have a house on it. It should be a permitted activity. And without explicitly coming out and saying the same thing, the National Environmental Standard that's been put out for consultation for granny flats, there's no mention of highly productive land in that. Every property, regardless of the soil quality, would be able to have a granny flat on it, possibly not a main dwelling. So I think that's quite clear guidance that those residential uses are considered supporting activities and not something that is necessarily required to be avoided on highly productive land. I think those were the main issues that I had, but if you've got any questions about anything?
Just to clarify, what the relief sought for the 30-metre setback for rural lifestyle zones, what is the relief you're seeking? That no setback be imposed? If it's internal, if the activity is internal to that property?
So there's a general setback requirement, which I think was 6 metres.
Yep.
Yeah, and also that's likely going to be the setback for granny flats. Something very similar to that.
Something similar to that,
If that national policy statement's adopted, so you'll have your main dwelling 30 metres from the boundary, but your granny flat can be quite close to the boundary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Ms McFlynn?
So you've today we received from you a Word document with a number of track changes to the provisions. So is that consistent with your primary evidence?
Yes, and I don't believe that there's any significant differences between that and what I submitted originally.
Okay, well, thank you for providing that. That illustrates what you're asking for. Just not a question for you, but to the officers, the issue that Ms McFlynn raises in paragraph 38 of her evidence relating consideration of objectives and policies from the assessment criteria and controlled and restricted discretionary activities, that issue has also been raised by Cameron Jury and Philip Mackay, who we're going to hear from shortly. So just remind me, where are the officers on that issue? What's the current position from the officers?
Yes, I can take this.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've looked into this. We do consider that it's appropriate to consider the objectives and policies as they provide for, I guess, guidance in considering activities. However, the RMA itself already says that in section 104.
Yeah.
So we are currently looking at removing that wording across the district plan.
Okay. I think you told us that in another hearing, but I just couldn't remember. So you're agreeing with the submitter's request?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
Questions? Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I was just reading through the Word document just to see if my question be answered, which I think it has around the wording you were proposing around reverse sensitivity. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to send that through earlier.
Okay, no, that was very helpful. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, Mr McFlynn.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr Mackay and Mr Holly, is it? Yes. Holly? Thank you.
Kia ora, Mr Chairman, panel and staff. I've actually got a supplementary statement that I'm going to read. I've got some hard copies here. Just hand them up if that's so.
Thank you. Yeah, this was pre-circulated earlier this morning.
Yeah, just
About an hour ago.
very
Oh,
recently.
Very
actually.
recently.
Copy for us.
No, I'm good. I'll follow it online. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can take your introduction and qualifications as read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So paragraph 2, I've reviewed the summary statement for mission development area and the various references there from the Section 42A reporting officer Lily Lawson. There are 2 issues discussed in that report that also relate to matters raised by the panel, which I wish to respond to on behalf of Marist Holdings Green Meadows Limited. These relate to the Mission Landscape and Visitor Precinct concert venue rule and to the Mission Productive Rural Precinct rural processing activities rule. So I'll just go through those, each of those. So firstly, the concert venue rule. Paragraph 23 of Ms. Lawson's summary statement in referring to the Marist Holdings evidence on the concert venue rule states they continue to seek changes to provide for smaller events with details of how this may be achieved yet to be finalised. So just referring back to paragraph 11 of my statement of evidence, so Marist Holdings are not continuing to seek changes to rule PREC 5R3 to provide smaller events. So Marist Holdings are now accepting of condition 2 of that rule in the limit of 5 concerts per calendar year, but basically accept that you know, if the concert venue's altered and there's a potential to hold smaller concerts, that a resource consent will be required to set that up. So paragraph 5, attachment A of Ms. Lawson's summary statement sets out the panel's questions and her responses. I note that the panel have questioned the wording of the concert venue rule condition 4. Table 1 below sets out the wording of that provision as notified alongside the wording recommended in the Section 42A report, which, as noted in my statement of evidence, Marist Holdings are accepting of. So the table just has the 2 rules side by side with the track changes in the right-hand column, which Marist Holdings were accepting of. However, I agree with the wording, that the wording in that condition 4 would be better expressed as a positive rather than a negative, and set out the times when amplified sound is allowed and suggest the following wording. So I haven't put in the track changes because it starts getting quite messy, but the wording proposed flips it around so that the days and hours listed are the times within which amplified sound equipment in a concert can be used. And I think it does read better. There was several points of confusion when you read this alongside condition 6.
We don't have to do the maths to work it out when you are allowed. Is that what you're seeking? Just you know exactly when the times are that you would be able to operate.
That's right. So Sunday to Thursday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Then Fridays, Saturdays, and days preceding a public holiday, 10 a.m. to 12 midnight, except that on the 1st of January, that could be extended to 1 a.m.
Thank you.
So if paragraph 7, if that change is accepted, then I would also recommend expressing condition 5 as a positive so that it reads as follows. So that one I have shown the track changes. So it's changing around where the not, so from the main condition, instead of saying must not, it would say must, and then A, not exceed a cumulative period of 6 hours, and B, be undertaken between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m, except may continue until 9 p.m. on the evening before the day of the concert or event. So I note that the panel were concerned with condition 6 and how it related to those two rules. So I'm suggesting that with those amendments, condition 6 would make sense and request that it remain as per the wording recommended in the section 42A report. And I've just listed that as follows. So it's basically setting that the noise limit of 85 dBA would apply outside of the hours specified. So before it was quite confusing because those rules were specifying that the hours were the opposite way around. So I think it makes sense with those changes.
Thank you.
So moving to the mission productive rural precinct, paragraph 9. The panel's questions ask whether the term rural processing activity in Rule 1 should be amended to primary production supporting activities. In considering this matter, I note the mission productive rural precinct has an underlying zoning of rural production zone and is therefore subject to the rules of that zone in any case. The rural processing activity rule R1 specifically enables the existing Mission Estate production winery. My understanding is that the term primary production supporting activities would only apply to processing of crops grown on the land on which the facility was located. The Mission Estate production winery processes grapes from a multitude of different locations, as well as grapes grown on the site. In my opinion, it is therefore appropriate to retain the term rural processing activity in Rule 1. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but also point out that Mr. Holly is available to answer questions and can speak knowledgeably about where the grapes are grown that are processed in the winery and also about the operation of the concert venue based on previous mission concerts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just double checking if there's a definition of rural processing activities to support the use of it in the precinct. It doesn't, it just talks about rural industry. So are you happy that that term is fairly clearly understood in the way it's used in that rule?
Yes, I do acknowledge that it actually isn't defined. So like a lot of the provisions in these mission precincts, it was carried over from the previous mission special character zone in the operative plan. So it similarly wasn't defined there. I would be happy to work with Ms. Lawson and propose a definition for rural processing activities if the panel thought that would help.
As far as you know, this is the only point in the PDP where the term is used?
Yeah, in which case it may not be. So I guess the mission's perspective is that is an existing production winery that processes grapes from a variety of locations, and therefore the original intent of the rule was to be enabling of that facility to continue and potentially to allow for expansion if required.
I'm just thinking of the wider implications, because rural processing has implicitly quite a wide meaning.
Yes, so in that regard, Mr. Chairman, from the Marist Holdings perspective, if it was narrowed to the, even perhaps to talk about the production winery, then that would probably be okay and it would narrow up the meaning.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Or Mr. Holly, would you like to comment on anything? It's particularly the concert side of things. So I understand.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it's become a feature on the landscape, and it's very well known in the international world now, and it's often referred to as the Wimbledon of outdoor events. So it's gaining traction, and we're fortunate enough to be able to get very high quality artists in. And I think the second thing is there's quite a strong and well-developed framework around how we run and deliver these events. And so, you know, there's things around safety and there's things around delivery and making sure that everybody gets home safely. But it is a very big event, and it takes a long time and a lot of money to set it up. And sometimes, you know, these things can start almost a year in advance, and we'll start with infrastructure up to 2 weeks before an event, and it's normally cleared up within a week after that. So it is a big event. Thankfully, we're in a rural zone, and it's well received by the community, and we do look after our neighbours in that process. So it's something which is, I think, is run quite well and as an advantage to the city.
And you're happy with the 5 events per year?
I can promise you now, sir, that I'm going to say yes, and in a year from now I'm going to go, why didn't we think about that? So it's just the way it is. You know, we had a situation with Elton John where he won an award and took off, and we had the whole paddock set up for over a week. You know, and there's a situation that you just have to deal with when you get it. But I think on the face of it, the framework that we have here would be quite suitable for what we have in mind.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the panel?
Yep. Mr. Mackay, just dealing with your pre-circulated primary evidence first, not a question, but you would have noted that I asked the officers about the issue you raised at your paragraph 17 about referring to objectives and policies in the assessment criteria.
Oh, yes.
And the staff have agreed with the relief that's now been sought.
Yes, thank you.
That's just to make sure you're aware of that. Your paragraph 23, have you had an opportunity, and I know it'd be speculative, to consider what the coalition government's recent proposed changes to the MPS HPL might mean for the matters that you raise at your paragraph 23?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So the status of the land is LUC1 on the land inventory maps.
Right.
And so those maps aren't particularly accurate. More so, for example, where the artisan village is proposed, the maps show the extent of LUC1 as being quite much greater than what it appears on the ground, for example, going a portion of the way up the hill, where the artisan village has sort of deliberately been located on the lesser productive land on which there's no vineyards.
Yeah.
So in terms of those changes proposed by the government, I mean, they're mainly focused on removing LUC3, so they wouldn't be of much assistance, except for the very last clause in that consultation document, which refers to potential for allowing on-the-ground assessments. And the reason why that could be helpful in terms of the production winery is not because of the status of the underlying soil. It's more because if there was a minor extension proposed to the winery, you know, for example, adding another 100 square metres for whatever reason, if that extension was within the existing yard area, which is already covered in hard stand surfaces, it wouldn't be wouldn't be removing any land out of production in any case. So that would be helpful if that change occurred.
Right.
And that's one of the practical difficulties in dealing with the MPS HPL, is that its bluntness and wording doesn't give any account of where yard areas have already modified the soil.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that. And just turning to your supplementary statement, thank you very much for giving some thought to rewording Precinct 5 Rule 3A, 4 and 5. And that certainly addresses the concern I had when I drafted the question that was put to the officers. So thank you for putting some thought to the wording. And I understand the point you make in your paragraph 8, that if we were minded to accept that wording, then the notified wording in 3A6 does work. So I understand the point you're making there, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the issue you raised in the discussion you had with the chair about rural processing activity, I couldn't quite follow where that landed. Are you suggesting a definition of that term be developed?
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking on my feet there, but I think as the conversation unfolded, so the original term, or the term that's there now, rural processing activities, rural processing activity.
Yeah.
I mean, that is quite, I guess, an all-encompassing term, when actual fact, I guess, for the purposes of the precinct, which is specific to Mission Estate, yeah, what Marist Holdings is really seeking to provide for is the production winery, you know, and it's not realistic that there would be a different type of rural processing activity there. So it could be more helpful if it was just made more specific to the winery.
Okay.
If that helps, I think that would be more beneficial than trying to define the term rural processing activity.
Okay, so now I understand. So we'd omit the term rural processing activity, but you'd have some bespoke wording that's targeted on the existing activities that actually occur, given this is the only place in the plan where that term's used. I understand.
Yes,
no, that would
exactly.
be helpful, I think, if we could see some wording in that regard. And maybe if you're developing that wording, just give some thought to scope, just that there's scope within the submission to do that. But if there's not scope, there's always clause 16.2 of the first schedule to clarify these matters if that's appropriate. So anyway, look forward to the wording.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No. I have no further questions. Thank you very much. That was helpful, very helpful. It sounds like we've condensed the outstanding issues to a few.
Yes, and I thank you, Mr. Chair and panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I understand our next submitter is on the way here. We're a bit early, so she's racing down. So we may just adjourn it until Ms. Simons is here in a hearing, so we'll do that. Has reconvened. Thank you very much for coming in earlier. We had a bit of juggling this morning and ended up with a bit of time.
That's
Thank you very
fine.
much for coming in. I've got your original submission in front of us,
Okay.
and I presume you've read the Section 42A report that addresses your submission.
I've read, I printed off what you gave me here,
Yep.
all right?
Okay. Yep.
But I'm going to speak generally because I think it's important that when I wrote this, it was a few months after Cyclone Gabrielle hit. So at that particular time, I'd actually done several submissions to different councils and interested parties in what had gone on. But I did this one because it must have been the last 5-year plan before that where I'd submitted before the actual mission subdivision went ahead with all of the infrastructure. So that still stands, but I'd like to speak differently if that's okay, because we've moved on since that, 18 months ago or whatever it was. Is that okay?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. We are kind of bound by what the relief sought in your original submission gave us, but I'm happy to listen to your sort of updated comments on the topic.
Okay.
For us. Thank you.
So I'll do that. I'll just, one sec, I'll just pull another couple of things out here. Organise myself. Okay, so my name's Margaret Simons, and I have properties in both Puketapu and Taradale. Both were impacted in Cyclone Gabrielle, and both a Taradale house and a Puketapu one were gutted and rebuilt. Before the cyclone in 2023, I had submitted to the Napier City Council my voice about the mission subdivision proposal. So this was well before it actually went ahead. I was aware of the history of Hawke's Bay and previous disasters. I actively taught Hawke's Bay students about preempting disasters, discussing the impact of rising oceans on coastal settlements, and whether it was wise to do this and who should pay for disasters and resettlement. Therefore, the risks from earthquakes, slips, tsunamis and floods have always been on my mind. I know as a historian that we've had 13 floods in Hawke's Bay, and the earliest record was 1847. The one that impacted the property that I live now at Puketapu in Springfield Road, that was 1897, and our original homestead there actually got washed away in the 1897 floods. I've lots of records about those particular times that I gathered from people from a long, long time ago. So I've got things quite well documented, and I was very aware of the trouble that people had actually travelling from the Taradale area around that particular time. I actually believe that the cyclone we had in 2023 dwarfed them all. So I know our old farmhouse got shifted in the 1897 flood and it was brought back, but this particular one, looking at my farmhouse on Springfield Road, it actually had water to the top of the windows there, and just through family history in the area, I realised that that flood was even bigger. And I think this is why it was so important to me to try and have a voice in what was going on here in Hawke's Bay. So, of course, when I saw the mission proposals for the hillsides there, I thought, this is great. People are building up high. You know, this is the way to go. It's the way of the future. We've got those hills there. We need to use them wisely. But we do need to minimise risk to people, even on hillsides, of them slipping. But more importantly, make sure that the stormwater provisions are sufficient. And this has been my issue right the way along, that yes, we have built ponds there, and I've been assured that those ponds are working all right, they're filling up with water, but we haven't had a repeat of the huge volume of water that came in the 2023 Cyclone Gabrielle. And it was definitely the volume of water which was actually quite unique, I think, in that cyclone, if you compare that to previous disasters that we've had here in Hawke's Bay. Now, I know Tukitoki's river is, you know, a bit of a distance away, but in the past, they've actually had 6 goes on their bridges there with the volumes of water that have gone through. So I believe that our waterways are actually really overloaded here in Hawke's Bay. So when we put a new subdivision like we have at the Mission block, I find it very hard to understand why the water's not being deviated out to sea. I've had it explained to me, of course, that no, these ponds that they've put there are sufficient to hold it, and that there are some problems of deviating the water out to sea. However, if people in the area still have an ongoing concern about a big volume of water coming into our tūtaikuri at Puketapu, it truly must be an issue. And I speak to a lot of the locals who perhaps haven't the confidence to write like I can write, or they, you know, don't really like speaking publicly to people. But they've very much got a voice, and a lot of them do say this to me, how worried they are about where it's going to go from here. So the people I'm talking about and the people I talk to are the people from the back of Parati, Puketitiri Road, where all those ponds were at the back of Puketitiri Road that started flooding. And some of them still are flooded. If any of you know the district out there, they're perpetually full of water, these low areas there now. And if there's another disaster, it just means that the water pulls up even more, and then it just comes back exactly the same as it did in Cyclone Gabrielle, back down into Springfield Road, then makes its way to Waiheke with this huge impact that it had at Waiheke, and then into Taradale, and that's why I have to have a Taradale house gutted as well, because yes, houses in Taradale were actually affected by Cyclone Gabrielle as well. So I don't know whether it's too late for diverting or making provision for the future for water to go out into the inner harbour from the Mission subdivision, but really it doesn't seem sensible. It just seems too risky sending it the way that it is at the moment. Now, New Zealand is the second riskiest country in the world for disasters. Only Bangladesh is actually worse than New Zealand. So a priority always in New Zealand should be that we need to be able to manage risk. We've got to be able to manage catastrophic events, and people need to improve their resilience to natural disasters. We want to protect our families, our properties, our businesses, our business assets, and our goods. we don't want to end up like me, who still this much time later, you know, I go to get something, so this was a history book that somebody had given me, limited edition. Everything that went through the floods got a smell. I don't know if you're all aware of that. So wet, you've got a smell, it's nasty, but I actually needed this a couple of weeks ago. I go to find something, you know, business things I go to have to deal with, and everything's always the same. Now, ironically, I actually thought that I was on top of floods. I had some containers called Sistema Storage, put everything in there, same as I did my photograph albums, whatever, put everything filled with water in it and flooded. And, you know, it's absolutely devastating to find that you've got no photographs of yourself as a child or grow up. And I've had quite an exciting life. I would have liked to have had some of those photos. But more pressingly for my children, I don't have any children photos anymore because all these bins where I thought they'd be safe, they all filled with water. And so that was it. So on a daily basis, I'm actually dealing with this mess still. There's always something that we want. I'm a bit of a hoarder, I admit, anything to do with history, and that I did keep. I've had to throw, you know, most of it out actually, but I have still got a bit. And but there's always something that I have actually managed to save, which I'm you know, quite grateful to have. I'll just show you something that I can pass this around to you. Where did I put that there? Sorry. I just, you might be able to see it from here, some of the pictures that I took. So, or my sister actually took these ones. So this is the day of Cyclone Gabrielle, and we're talking here about Springfield Road. So Springfield Road is the road that the rubbish dumps on, and it's the road that some of you might know because you tried to travel along it, and there's been a big dip along there that's quite hard to travel over. Why the dip is in there is because it comes from a stream called the Turirau Stream, and the Turirau Stream comes from up Puketitri Roadway, and that's some of the water going from the Mission subdivision that's going through that area into that valley, and when you have a big flood, down it just all comes through Puketapu there. So the water's rushing through. That would have actually been the river over there. Next photo there is at 7:22 a.m. and the water is coming over the top of the stop banks there. Just a little white band. Springfield Road, where the dip is, and the Turirau Stream goes in underneath. They've just repaired the road there now. It's taken them 2 months. Unfortunately, very short-sightedly, they could have put it next to 2 culverts in underneath to feed the water through, but no, they've just gone back to the same culvert, and they spent 2 months building over the top of it, gone back to exactly as it was before, which is, you know, real pity, because we really need to get this water that starts off from Puketitri Road, from the Mission subdivision, coming down back through Puketapu. It really needs a bigger outlet to get out and back into the Tutaikiri. That's the valley that I live in. I'm going to show you a picture of my house under flood in a minute. That whole valley there is flooded. All of my neighbours with fruit trees and whatever, all of that went under, as well as their homes. And actually in this area, Springfield Road area, we're all just still rebuilding and trying to get these orchards and crops back to the way that they were before. Over on this side, this is the Tutaikiri River, but over on the other side, you've got Omaranui Road, which in that photo Maranui Road is also under because that road went under on the other side of the Tutaikiri, and then right the way back to Swamp Road, which also went under. This is my farmhouse and my guest cottage. So we lived 18 months in a caravan. Now we're living in a little guest cottage there. You might be able to see we've actually got water right up to the roof. So the farmhouse is still there. It's historic, 1860s. And, you know, water way the heck up there. And so that's why everything that we had's ruined the way that I've told you, because I did think that I'd preempted with my document shed with where I had things, but, you know, I couldn't stop everything filling with water. So why it looks like this is because all the way from Puketitri, below the Mission subdivision, the water's just come down through there. Blocked up the Tutaikiri, which from Puketapu to where we are, there's been 3 breaks along there where water's come piling through because it's totally overloaded. That's the day after the flood. So this is where the big break went through in Springfield Road that they've just put back to the under road culvert exactly as it is. They didn't put any extra pipes. So the water's going down, but that great big dip's there. So I think the long-term Puketapu residents, they can see that some things are wrong. Only yesterday, Roger Alexander was talking to me after church how short-sighted the new Springfield Road Turi Road stream outlet is. He queried why limestone was on the sides of the drain, for a start. In a flood, the limestone would slip back into the channel and just block it all up. So summing up, it's now 2 years and 4 months since the cyclone. What a waste of these years it has been for me. I had to finish teaching in a hurry. My job every day has been dealing with flood stuff. I see my neighbours trying to make their orchards productive. I see homes similar to the one at my place, where we've lived in the caravan just left. I see my possessions. I see my aim to write a history book of the area curtailed. I'm still too busy just trying to get post-flood things together. So in conclusion, I don't want others to have to suffer this post-flood journey. It has ruined many lives and the financial cost has been horrendous. The risk of poor infrastructure planning, such as the Mission's stormwater exit, is too great. I'm just going to show you a glimpse of a couple of other things to do with post-cyclone life. Last year, I decided I wanted to go to a friend's wedding in Sendai in Japan. And Sendai is the area where they had the tsunami. And now, when you go to Sendai, so it's north of Tokyo on the east coast, you can still see some of the things that happened because of the tsunami, such as 26 kilometres inland, there's a school, and everybody drowned there because following the way that they do things in Japan, like New Zealand, they had earthquake procedures, and all the kids and the teachers were standing outside the school after the earthquake, and although they were told a tsunami was coming, they didn't move, and there was a hill right behind the school, the Sokawa school, but they just all drowned in the freezing water that came through the tsunami. So, you know, this is quite a few years after this tsunami, and there's still evidence of what happened. The good thing is that after 3 years, they got their rice paddies and things going again. They chose not to build in some areas. They've got this managed floodgate sort of system going there as well. So if anything like that happens again, you know, they've got provision for it, which is probably fairly similar to what I hope you're all planning for Hawke's Bay. So my request on this one is, yes, long-term planning, we do have to build. It's logical that we build up on these hills that we've got around, but we really need to think about where's all of our water going. You know, tsunamis could happen any day, who the heck knows? But these sorts of things are just very, very rare. But they do happen. And I will give, you know, council, they had a group called Tupori working on our roads. And, you know, this team of people, they were very, very good on what they were doing, and they were excellent with their communication with all of us too. But, you know, I look at the engineers today and they're young. I don't think they talk to that many of the old engineers like Norm Olsen, I think his name was, that was around, and some of the other ones, but they possibly could be getting a little bit more advice from the older people around Hawke's Bay that know the way that things work. So when we do go and plan things like the mission and whatever, we end up with a sensible outcome. So that's me, unless anybody would like to ask me anything about, you know, what I've been talking about.
Just to clarify it for me, so the mission development area sort of straddles two catchments, doesn't it? It's the catchment that flows down towards Taradale.
Yes.
And then there's the other part of the catchment that flows inland, and that's the area you're most concerned, because that stream eventually comes out?
Yes.
Under the Springfield Road and
yes.
to Taikuri?
Yes.
That's correct, okay. So, and your concern there is that not with any residential development of those catchments or sub-catchments, or whatever you call them, you're worried about the exacerbation of the additional runoff into the stream and then...
Yes, that's exactly it. Right. And as I said, that's the general local worry. But I don't know, I think, when I think of all the people over there, yeah, some have a bit to say about it, but a lot of people, they've got quite severe anxiety through what they've been through, and they're just not comfortable now speaking and whatever, but they do know what they want, and the slip things, you know, that Puketoi Road going over towards what used to be Brookfields Farm, I don't know if you, Brooklyn Station, you know, they had so many slips over there and whatever. And unfortunately, it's just the nature of the game here in probably the whole of New Zealand. We just have slips, you know, so we need to be prepared for that. And where does everything go? Some people talk about the Tutaikuri River with all the slash that came in it. Definitely, the slash wasn't the best in there coming down. But that plus the containers and everything that came down the Tutaikuri River, that's what knocked out those bridges. But essentially, it was just this immense volume of rain. And you know, that, as I said, I don't think that 1897 flood was quite as high as what this was. But then back in those days, we didn't have stop banks around Hawke's Bay either. So water just used to go the way that it wanted to go.
And just to clarify further too, you're not opposed to actually the residential development of the mission development?
No.
It's just how they manage the stormwater runoff.
That's exactly right, thank you.
That it doesn't add to the problem that's already there.
That's correct.
Okay, Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Simons?
No,
Well, good. No, that was great. Thank you very much for coming in and coming in earlier too. That was helpful.
It's okay.
Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Lunchtime.
Okay, we will adjourn the hearing until after lunch, which will resume at 1:30 with Hawke's Bay Airport, talking to their designations. So thank you very much, everybody.